Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Matar, and I am the Associate Director of Marketing in the Graduate School here at Wayne State. This is the fourth or fifth event that we have been hosting this semester on our professional development series. This is a series of events for graduate students, faculty, staff, prospective students, all about professional skills and habits to help you in your career, both during and after your time at Wayne State. I'm honored to have a very esteemed guest here to speak with us today. Sondra Jenkins will be our main speaker. We also have Kim White Jenkins, who is also kind of going to be in the background, and she will be handling some of the chat questions that may be coming up. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat here. This is the 7 habits of highly effective people and how they're as relevant as ever. I've taken a quick look at the slides. This should be a very interactive and engaging session. So again, please feel free to share your thoughts in the chat, and we'll try to answer those as quickly as we can. Without further ado, Sondra, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Nick, and good afternoon, everyone, students, and also to the marketing team. It's certainly my pleasure to be here as a part of Wayne State University's Executive and Professional Development team. My colleague Kim and I, who are no relation, have been working together for quite some time now, developing and delivering a number of really powerful workshops to business audiences across the region. And we are excited to be a part of your development experience with this very seminal workshop, if you will, that focuses on some principles that really came out in, I want to say, the year 2000 or thereabouts, 7 habits of highly effective people, but they are as relevant as ever. So if you have been engaged in leadership development long enough to have been part of the original workshops, and don't feel that you can roll your eyes and say that was then and this is now, because what we are going to see is that effectiveness is timeless, and the principles of effectiveness, there may be some changes in terms of how we apply them, but the principles themselves are really quite timeless. Just by way of quick background about myself, Kim describes me as a lowercase r retiree. I have recently, well, actually it's been a couple of years now, retired. I was previously executive director of organization development and human resources for the Detroit Institute of Arts for about 20 years. And before that, an organization development consultant. And in my time since leaving the DIA, retiring from the DIA, I have continued work with Executive and Professional Development Division, and also some other consulting engagements, helping individuals and organizations achieve success. I tell people, you tell me where you want to go, I can help you get there. And so again, it's my pleasure to be a part of your development experience, and it's our objective to make sure that this time this afternoon is well spent for you. So with that in mind, let's dig right in. So I think you're all familiar with Zoom functionality at this point in our post-pandemic or our pan-pandemic experience. I think all of us have developed some level of expertise with Zoom. Of most importance here is the point that Nick brought out, that if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box. Kim will be monitoring that and make sure that I get any questions or any feedback that you may have. Okay. So here's the ground we're going to cover this afternoon. We're going to spend a little bit, a hot minute, understanding the framework. Executive and Professional Development Division, we put these workshops together with a mindset, skill set framework. And I'm going to talk about that for a minute. We'll understand what a habit is. If we're going to study the 7 habits of effective, highly effective people, we want to make sure we understand what a habit is. And we'll obviously introduce and define each of the 7 habits, and then give an opportunity to apply or to see how these habits can apply in our personal experience. I'm going to ground this. Next slide, please. In just a really foundational quote that lays the foundation, even establishes a cornerstone for today's workshop. And this is a quote from Stephen Covey himself, the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, who says, "We are what we repeatedly do." And he makes the point that excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And so we come to this workshop with a recognition that excellence in our careers, excellence in our personal lives is not something that just happens by accident. It's not something that's just serendipitous. It is actually, we break it down to specific behaviors, if you will, specific behaviors that give the results that we're looking for. That's what makes us effective. And when we talk about behaviors, we want to understand and be able to make choices about behaviors to the point that they become a habit, not just an incidental action, but a habit, part of the way that we operate. And so with this in mind, we're going to look at these habits and how we can develop them. And so our objectives, again, consistent with what we pointed out in the agenda, is to make sure that we understand the relevance of these particular habits for our success. We want to give you the opportunity or the ability to be able to apply these habits to your work here in the graduate school, in your current work, and in your future career tracks. So I talked about the framework that gives the context that at Wayne State, in our Executive and Professional Development Division, we talk about mindset versus skill set, because we recognize that, we can have skills. It's possible for us to have intellectual knowledge. It's possible for us to have technical skills. But when it comes to career success, when it comes to leadership success, what we find is that those skills really become moot. They are not operable outside of a mindset that values them. And so when part of the principle with which we deliver our leadership training is we want to make sure that our participants understand and embrace a mindset of success and effectiveness, as well as the technical skills that will allow us to get there. So this is why, we will be interactive, we will be relevant, we'll be making constant and consistent applications to real world situations, if you will, because we don't want to just be intellectually on point. We want to have a framework, that mental framework, that framework of attitude, that framework of character, if you will, that allows us to apply those skills for the impact that I know we're all looking for. When we look at the 7 habits, and those of you who are proactive, habit number 1, you may have already Googled 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. You may have purchased the book or, dusted it off from your bookshelf or downloaded the audio. But what we will find is that these 7 habits fall into 3 different categories, because what we want to do is develop fluency. We want to be able to recognize when when and where each habit applies. And so the buckets, if you will, the categories for these habits, we're going to talk about the first three, which get into self-mastery, private victories, things that we'll do that other people may or may not even be aware of, that may not be visible to others, if you will. But it involves some aspect of personal discipline or self-mastery. And then the second set of habits that we'll develop are the ones that involve interdependence, involve our work with others. Many of you may also be familiar, or there may be other workshops coming up in this series on emotional intelligence, which has to do with our interdependence. It's been said that, frankly, once you get past the task level of a particular job or a track, once you get into any level of leadership, your success is determined really more by your engagement or your interactions, your success in interactions with others. And so this idea of interdependence, recognizing how you connect with others and being able to leverage and to maximize that impact. This gives you what we'll call the public victories, because these are behaviors that others will see, that others will recognize, and that also are going to contribute to your success, your effectiveness and your success. And then the third bucket, the third category of habit is one that says, once I have achieved these, once I have mastered these habits, my private victories, the habits that will give me public victory, how can I keep it going? How will I sustain it? How will I make sure that I don't drop away, that I stay on point? And that habit has to do with renewal. And so this is the direction that we're going. We're starting from the inside out, self-mastery, our private victories, if you will, interdependence and public victories, and then renewal, keeping it sustained, keeping it going, continuing in our growth. So let's start with the basics. What is a habit? What is a habit? Here is one definition that we'll be using that underscores where we are today. A habit is a consistent unconscious pattern. Consistent unconscious patterns that constantly express our character and produce our effectiveness or ineffectiveness. Consistent unconscious patterns. This is key. So not just an individual, an isolated behavior, not just an isolated instance, but a pattern. And that pattern, whether we recognize it or not, expresses our character. And it impacts our success. Many times in my coaching, my leadership coaching, whether it was with an organization or in independent coaching situations, a leader will describe a problem that they're having that they don't seem to be, that they are having, that doesn't seem to be, they don't seem to be getting anywhere with it. They don't seem to be able to crack the code. And well, we'll talk about it, and we'll give an approach, let's do this, let's do a little more of this, let's try a little less of this. And they'll come back and they said, I did such and such a thing, and it didn't change. I said this to them, I handled this situation this way, and there was no change. And what we have to point out is, in one isolated instance, if you have a pattern of poor communication, one isolated instance of improved, better communication isn't going to change the overall trajectory of your success. And so when we talk about habits, when we talk about developing these habits, what we want to do is lay the groundwork for patterns of behavior, recognizing that the ease or the difficulty with which we have embracing these habits actually say something about our mindset that we talked about that character, and it really has a direct impact on our effectiveness or ineffectiveness. So sometimes that can be a little bit daunting, because if I have a habit that is a derailer, that's getting in the way of my success, and yet it's a just an integral part of who I am, it can be a little discouraging. But the good news is habits are changeable with effort. So once I recognize what is either contributing to my success or getting in the way of my success, I have the ability to change that with effort, with awareness and with effort. And that's that aspect of resilience, personal efficacy, if you will, that ability to change. That's what we're going to be tapping into this afternoon. Okay. Let's look at habit number 1 in the category of self-mastery. Category number 1 is to be proactive. Be proactive. Being proactive means take the initiative. Being proactive means either I act, recognizing that either I act or I am acted upon. Being proactive means I can't just, when it comes to my effectiveness as a leader, when it comes to my effectiveness in my career, I don't have the luxury of just sitting and waiting for things to happen. I have to take the initiative, if you will, to position myself for the success that I want to achieve. And there are a key principle, two dynamics, if you will, that have a lot to do with my ability to be proactive, are these concepts of a circle of concern and my circle of influence. Circle of concern and circle of influence. My circle of concern has to do with, it includes all the things that I worry about, all the things that matter to me. Okay, slide says constantly worried about. Doesn't mean that I'm sitting there and I'm constantly worried about these things, but these are things that matter to me, things that I have some emotional investment in. It could be my work, my career matters to me. My success, my progression in this graduate program matters to me. My finances, current and my aspirations matter. My health, the people in my world, the life, all of these things are things that are part of my circle of concern. In the workplace, my workplace environment, the personalities of my coworkers, the personality or the effectiveness of my boss, all of those things are part of my circle of concern. My circle of influence has to do with things that I actually have the ability to impact. These are things that I can influence by my response. I can proactively respond to it. They can are things that I can impact by adopting certain behaviors. They are things or situations that I can impact by my reaction. So circle of concern is a larger circle of everything that matters to me. My circle of influence has to do with the things that I have the ability to impact. And the more time that I spend in just sort of randomly in my circle of concern, the less time I'm going to spend on my circle of influence. So we're going to look at a couple of slides that'll help us understand how we can narrow down, how we can get focused, if you will, and weed out the things that are that may be draining our emotional energy and impacting our success. So here on the left, you'll see some examples of things in my circle of concern. My genetic disposition. So this could be, the ease with which I gain or lose weight. It could be my tendency or the likelihood, if you will, the risk of my having a certain health issue or not. That's something that's of my concern. I don't have control over that, but what I do have control over is how I maintain my health. What choices do I make in light of the issues in my circle of concern? And so the more time I spend on circle of influence, the more time I spend focused on how the actions that I can take, how I can maintain my health, if you will, the more likely I am to achieve impact and success. The more time I just stress out in general about life is tough, everybody in my family is fat and so forth, or everybody in my family has heart problems, the less time I'm going to spend being proactive on things that I can influence. We could make the same kinds of parallels about traffic. I don't have control over traffic, but I do have control over the route I take. I do have control over what time I leave in the morning. I don't have control over the government strategies, actions, over what the government does or doesn't do, but I do have control over who I vote for. I do have control about the civic activities that I get engaged with. I don't have control about the business impact on my, or the economic impact on my business, and the health of how the economy impacts my overall business. But I do have control over, if I'm in a frontline customer serving role, I do have control with how I maintain those customers and how I develop relationships and, certain aspects of contribution to business success. I have control over that. I don't have control over all that's going on in the world with my colleagues and my team members and who's Zooming who and all that I don't have control over that, but I do have control over the conversations that I have and the people that I choose to befriend and to spend my lunchtime with, and the direction of our conversations. And so we can see throughout this, and if you think about as I think about, I'll just put it with myself, as I think about colleagues in my former work situations and in many of my personal situations now, the people who are always stressing and complaining and so forth are really tied up in their circle of concern, and they are doing relatively little in the circle of influence to make a difference. And so I used to tell employees that would come to me and we'd be talking through issues, if you don't like the view out of the window that you're standing in, change windows, move your feet, do something. In other words, be proactive to engage in, to identify the opportunity for influence, and be proactive, if you will, to take those actions. Don't just wallow in your particularly in the negative aspects of your circle of concern. Let's look at the next slide. So let me ask you, you can come off mute, come off your profile pictures, and let me ask, what are some examples of that comparison, circle of concern, circle of influence, that you experience, whether it's in school, in your workplace, in personal life? What are some other examples we might add to this list? Anyone? Not one example. This list was totally comprehensive. Okay. Time on social media can influence how much time I spend in my circle of influence. Ooh, social media is a huge, what do I want to say? A huge place for just stirring up, staying in our circle of concern, isn't it? A huge echo chamber. It's like we just massage. It's this huge groupthink, or this place where we stay tied up in our circle of concern. And the more time we spend there, we actually, are taking away from the time that we're actually doing something about it. How many jobs are in my field versus the venues? Let me see that again. Let me see here. Thank you, Graham. How many jobs are available in my field versus the venues I can go through to search for jobs? Okay, that's great. That's a great example. So rather than stress about what's out there. Focus on what you can do to take advantage of what is there. When it comes to collaboration, from Killian, thank you. Some people feel unable to change those that they work with. That's true. And I'm a big advocate of working with those who inspire and support your work. As much as possible, those are the people, if you're on social media, you've seen the meme that says, don't stay where you're tolerated, go where you're appreciated. And the same applies, or something parallel applies to our colleagues. Let's work with people who have the same aspirations, who are facing forward. Don't get tied up with all the negativity. Okay, great. Work with those who inspire you. Concern about contracting COVID-19, ouch, and who's doing what to mitigate this thing versus what I can do, who I spend time with, the extent to which I engage in protective measures like masks and so forth, and let me work on decreasing my likelihood instead of trying to get all caught up in changing other people's minds to match mine. Good, thank you, Bethany. So we can see, and if you keep thinking, if you think about this, there are so many areas where, it's so easy to get sucked into, into the trap of just wallowing in a circle of concern, a negative circle of concern, because obviously there's some positive things we're concerned about as well. But to the extent that we get trapped in that circle of concern, frankly, positive or negative, we reduce the time that we are actively engaged in doing something to advance the things that matter. And so let's be aware of that and be proactive, to be active, to be proactive, positively active, if you will. Next slide, please. And thank you for those of you who contributed. Oops, what happened? Habit number 2. Begin with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. And surely you've heard this, whether you were around when 7 Habits first came out or not. But there's an expression that all things are created twice. First, it's in your mind, and then it's what you physically create. And so when we start with a clear understanding of the outcome that we want, a clear understanding of what we're trying to include, when we start with that, it gives us clearer vision about where we're going, what it's going to take to get there, what challenges we might expect so that we can prepare for them. But the key is understanding where are we trying to go so that we don't waste time and energy, if you will, just sort of wandering around. I want to say it's Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland that is attributed to the quote, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So if we don't have a clear understanding of the outcome that we want, a clear understanding of the impact that we're trying to achieve, a clear understanding of the destination that we're going, we are likely to waste a lot of time, if you will, spinning around in circles, taking detours in places that are not contributing to our success. This is also where how the distinction is nuanced, if you will, between leadership and management, because leadership is really about that first creation. With leadership, there comes vision, and this is personal leadership as well as leadership within an organization by title, if you will. But what do I want to accomplish? Okay, so this gets up to self-mastery. So that's a personal leadership as well. What do I want to accomplish? Where do I want to end up? Where do I want to be 5 years from now? And then I manage my time, I manage my choices, I manage direction for the second creation. What does it take to get there? How can I best accomplish those things? Many times when people get frustrated and when they feel lost and overwhelmed, many times we find that we have not spent enough time crystallizing what is we want to accomplish and what success actually looks like. And so to the extent that we spend some clear time, journal it, reflect on it, ask yourself specifically, what will success look like? How will I know when I've gotten there? What's it going to take to get there? Then I will be able to chart the path that allows me to accomplish it with minimal wasted time, minimal detours along the way. And again, this applies here in school, work/career, personal life. Begin with the end in mind. Let's look at habit number 3 in our self-mastery bucket, which is, now that I know where I'm going and I understand what it takes to get there, I've got to be mindful to put first things first. And remember that we said habits are about behaviors that become patterns, right? Patterns of behavior. So I can't just do this in an isolated an isolated instance. I want to make it a habit of putting first things first. How am I managing my time? How am I managing my attention? How am I managing my emotions? Where am I choosing to put my energy? And I want to make sure that I put first things first. Now, as we look at all of the things that compete for our attention, next slide, please, Kim. If we look at all the things that compete for our attention, this grid gives us one way of categorizing them, if you will. You've got a world of things, or a category of things that you could say are urgent. These are things that are demanding your attention right now. And you've got a category of things that are not so urgent. You've got categories of things that are really important, categories that are not important. And so if you line them up, if you divide them into as depicted here on this grid, under category 1, quadrant 1, if you will, the urgent and important, these are things that are true crises, right? The building is on fire. There's a health crisis. There's a business crisis. They are truly pressing problems that are significant. So this is not just, a broken heel on your shoe. No, these are pressing, significant problems that impact what is important to you. Your deadline-driven projects are examples of things that have some urgency. They have some importance. These fall into quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 are issues and activities that are important, but they're not urgent. And these end up being things that it's easy to skip. It's easy to ignore until they become crisis and they move over into quadrant 1. So these are things like your planning activities, preventive activities, things that you do to prevent them from becoming crises, right? Building relationships, key relationships is something that is important, but because it doesn't have that the crisis urgency, it's something that if we're not careful, we neglect it, whether it's our families or business relationships. We can neglect relationships. Learning and development, personal growth. How do I know that that Zoom and similar platforms are not just the way of the future, they're the way of the present right now. But if I'm not particularly good at it, it's something that it's important for me to gain mastery, but it may not be urgent because I haven't had to host a meeting myself yet. I haven't had to learn I haven't had to screen share myself. I've always had Kim working alongside me. So it's something that I know is important, but I have the luxury of it not being urgent right now. Wellness and self-care. Ouch. Ouch, ouch. How many of us are neglecting some aspect of our health, some aspect of whether it's our physical health or our mental and emotional health, because, it's not yet a crisis. So these are things, these quadrant 2 things are on a burner that have the potential to get out of control. They have the potential to boil over and become crises and overwhelm us as category 1 things if we don't find a way to pay attention. And I saw a question come up on the chat of what are some strategies for time management. And, that can be a workshop all by itself, but we'll try and share some of the things that have worked for us in a few minutes as we move forward. So it's category 1 or quadrant 1, quadrant 2 activities. Quadrant 3 are things that are not important, but they're urgent. The interruptions that we get, if you're in an office environment that has an open door policy, the fact that people take advantage of that open door policy and they actually show up in the open door when you're trying to work on quadrant 1 activities, it is urgent, but it may or may not be important to you. It may be important to them, but not to you. Some of our mail, some of the reports that we generate are things that are urgent, but they may or may not be important. There may be some meetings that we have to look at. There may be some other pressing matters that are like in our face that just show up that we've got to attend to, but we get frustrated because we can argue that they are not particularly important. Popular activities, urgent, but they're scheduled. Tonight, I don't know, tonight's your bowling night. I'm making that up. Tonight's moving night. I mean, it's urgent because it's tonight, right? But is it important? Is it for the long range goals that you have, the aspirations that you have? But those are the quadrant 3 items. And then quadrant 4 are things that are not urgent and frankly not important, but they still are in the circle of things that we have to attend to. There's a lot of busy work, a lot of I'm going to say, I'm originally from North Carolina. The expression in the South is piddling around. So sometimes people will call me, what are you doing? I'm piddling around. I'm up too late. I'm staying up late. What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not going to bed on time, So whether it's playing words with friends, whether it's straightening the junk drawer just because it caught my attention, those are things, busy work that's not urgent, not important, but yet things that I might, if I'm not careful, I find myself spending a disproportionate time on. Some of the mail that I handle, phone calls, I call it the empty calories of activities. So there are some things, I don't know about you, but sometimes I will have such great plans for a day off. This is going to be a day that I'm going to make I'm going to make a lot of progress. Or I go into the office. This is a day that I'm really going to make a lot of progress. And at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I haven't done anything. And I found that I've actually spent a lot of my time in quadrant 4. Okay, so Kim says somebody would call it work avoidance, and sometimes that's true, right? Because I don't want to do that quadrant 1 report. I'd much rather go through email and unsubscribe from all my junk mail. I'd much rather do that than work on that deadline-driven project, right? So those are category 4 activities that can take up a lot of time and that can get in the way of our effectiveness. Okay, and now we're going to let's move into some of the strategies. This answers the question that came up earlier. Who was that raised that question about what we can do? Was that Eileen, was it? Mm-hmm. So here's some quick strategies, and then I'm going to ask you to share some things that have worked for you. For quadrant 1 activities, these are the things we must do first. We have to develop the discipline, develop the habit of putting first things first. If it's important and urgent, I've got to prioritize that. I've got to make room on my calendar, book it as an appointment to make sure that I spend time on it. Set milestones, set my plan backwards to make sure that I have adequate time. But these are the things, my quadrant 1 activities are the things that are most important for my success. Notice they are not all the urgencies. So it's not about how do I get on top of everything that's urgent. How do I get on top of what is urgent and what is important for the destination, right? I begin with the end in mind. Where am I trying to go? What am I trying to achieve? Make sure that I'm paying attention to what matters. A career tip. Find out the people who influence your next move. So whether it's your boss, whether it's another leader, whether it's a key peer, whatever, what matters to them, make sure that you're attending to the things that will matter for your next move. Make sure that you are attending. Make sure that the things that matter to your boss, if your boss is a key decision maker for your next step, make sure that the things that matter to your boss are in your quadrant 1. Don't think because it's quadrant 3 2 or 3 to you. If it's quadrant 1 to someone who matters, you want to make it quadrant 1 for yourself as well. But those are the things you want to attend to first. In terms of quadrant 2 activities, these are things that I recognize that are important, but remember I've said that because they are not urgent, it's easy to overlook them. And so these you want to put on the schedule, right? You want to put your medical checkups, your doctor's appointments on the schedule ahead of time. You don't want to wait until you start feeling symptoms and then, oh, by the way, you're going to go get attended to. Put it on the schedule. If there's a report, if there is something that would be of value for you to attend to, put it on the schedule so that it becomes a part of your flow, your rhythm, if you will. Okay, it's not urgent, but you have to keep it on your radar by scheduling it and by making sure that it gets the visibility that it deserves in its importance. Okay, someone else said list making. That's great. Every day I create a list with low cost activities. That's great. That's great. Okay, it helps us feel productive, and also it makes sure that you don't miss some things, that it keeps them from spilling over into that urgent crisis category. Great idea. Thank you. Quadrant 3. Things that are urgent but not important. The Stephen Covey recommendation, the 7 Habits recommendation, is to delegate. Now, when Kim and I were, as we were sort of previewing the book and refreshing our knowledge and getting ready for this class, we talked about delegate. And I made the point that when Stephen Covey first came out with this book and these principles, this training was primarily delivered to senior corporate executives, what we call the C-suite, right? The C-suite executives. And so the idea of delegating, there are some things that you shouldn't be worried about that you give to other people to do. We may or may not have the luxury of delegating our urgent but not important things, our quadrant 3 things. We may or may not have the luxury of delegating these to other people. But things that we can do, I would say delegate, or in some cases automate, right? Is there a way that I can make this happen seamlessly? So for me, for example, personal example, the overwhelming majority of my bills I have set up for auto pay, so that it just magically happens. I call it magic. All I have to do is keep money coming in, right? Stay working or something so that there's money there. But I have it set up on auto pay. Or you may take things and automatically calendarize them, have things set up with a shortcut that you can get them onto your calendar. Kim says send emails to folders. So there are some things that we can do that make things happen much more smoothly and much more automatically, right? If I automatically sort into folders, then when I need it, when it moves up from a quadrant 3 to a quadrant 1 or 2 kind of activity, I know where it is. It's automatically there. So these are things that we want to look for ways to organize and to prep them, or to stage them, if you will, so that we don't spend a lot of time in this quadrant with things that are urgent and not important. Okay, develop partnerships that you can refer tasks to others. Are there some things that are busy work for you, but would be welcomed as a developmental opportunity for someone else? Can this be an opportunity for you to coach or to build someone else? Things along that line. This is also where there are some things that where you may need to where you re-examine the priority. Is it really a category 3 or is it actually a category 4? Is it something that I need to, or quadrant 4? Is it something that I need to say no to? Is it something that I need to stop? Do I need to unsubscribe from those emails? Do I need to set up office hours for myself so that I don't have the constant interruptions? So look for ways to automate or to otherwise keep those activities that are urgent but not important, keep them from sapping the time and energy and attention, if you will, from what is important. Okay. Quadrant 4. This is the busy work, if you will, the empty calories. And as much as possible, look for ways to eliminate it or minimize it, right? I will never eliminate playing. I will likely never, let me put it that way. I will likely never completely eliminate my love for words with friends. I will likely never completely eliminate my love for, I don't know, organizing the junk drawer as a strategy for work avoidance, or as a way to, frankly, clear my head so that, you know, when you're doing, sometimes when you're doing busy work, it allows your brain to work on complex problems. You know, it's I think there's some name in Eastern philosophy for that kind of thing. But I may never be able to eliminate the quadrant 4 things, but I can discipline myself to minimize them. I can give myself a certain amount of time. I can limit the time. I can blend those in with things that add more value, right? So I can do it while I'm doing something else. But what I want to do when I'm managing the time is I'm, again, managing time, energy, and emotion with what all the things that are in front of me. How do I sort it out? And proportionately, this shows us 4 quadrants that are all even in size, but proportionately, I can't afford that luxury. That quadrant 1 has to be the largest. That quadrant 4 has to be the smallest when it comes to where I spend my time. Does that make sense? I saw a couple of suggestions and personal experiences pop up in the questions. What else would you add in terms of challenges that you face with these quadrants, or strategies that you use to handle them? Someone?
Hi, yes. My name is Portia, and I always have an issue delegating. Is there any tips that we can give, that you can give, about trying to give up the work?
Listen, if you have the ability to delegate and you don't, it's because you've got a problem. You're likely, because I'm pointing 1 finger at you and 3 at myself, to have a problem with perfectionism. You know, it's like, if I have the ability to delegate and I don't, the issue is not the problem, the issue is me. The issue, I have to ask myself, why am I reluctant to release control? You know, am I afraid that the other person doesn't have the skills that they need, the expertise? And if so, let me spend some time coaching them so that they are in a position to help me. If I, you know, it's one thing if I'm in a position and I don't have anyone I can delegate to, but if I do have the opportunity, I do have assistance, and I don't do it, then I have to look deeper into why am I not doing that? And so my tip would be, just do it. And here someone says, use little tasks to start with. Using little tasks to start out with. And even with delegation, start with something small, give yourself more comfort, more trust, because that's often an issue of trust, that the person may or may not do it like you, and release control, that it might not be done exactly like you do it, but sometimes done is better than perfect. And set yourself free. And is that helpful at all?
Yes, yes, it was. It was eye-opening too at the same time.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions or tips? Let me see. Chats go away. I can't see this profound thing. Here we go. How I'm looking, using little tasks to start me out for the day. Answering emails is a way to get me sitting at my desk. Setting timed goals for certain activities. I like that. Time goals let me set limits for things. I like that. That's good. That's good. That's a good way to handle the 3s and 4s. Quadrant 2, 3s, and 4s. That's good. That's important. Thank you. What else we have? Delegation can feel great when the person you delegate to gets a development opportunity. So sometimes that's something else, is to reframe it. Instead of thinking of yourself as giving work away, most of you on this line, I'm sure, would love to help others achieve greater success. And so think of it as taking the opportunity to help someone else develop some skill or expertise that you have. So think of it as an opportunity, and it may make you more willing to share that opportunity. Okay, it's become a greater challenge in the current remote work environment. That's true. And so here, there's an investment that has to be made, because sometimes I have to spend more time with the person, either in a Zoom conversation to explain it or something else. I have to spend more time to create that FaceTime, to build that trust. So that becomes something I have to schedule, and something I have to phase in, or I have to, I say schedule and maybe start small and then work my way up. I can't just dump a huge project on someone remotely, but it does become a quadrant 2 priority to develop the kind of relationship and identify the projects where I do have that opportunity. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, well, let's move on to our next habit, which is habit 4. So habits 1 through 3 had to do with personal mastery, right? And just as I talked about with delegation, there are some things that are personal mastery. How do I choose to use my time? How do I choose to frame things? Am I being proactive? Am I beginning with the end in mind? Am I being intentional? Am I being proactive? Am I being intentional? Am I being strategic? Those are my first three habits. And so those are personal aspects of my personal private victory, if you will. And so now we move into the category of public victories. And these are things that involve my relationship with others, my interdependence with others. And the first one is to let go of this paradigm of competition and think win-win. We could stop here. We could have a whole, and this would solve so many problems in so many different arenas. But to stop thinking of others as our competition, stop thinking of others as being against us, stop thinking of life as being unfair, think win-win. And this is defined, we can see one of 6 paradigms or 6 ways of looking at human interaction, if you will. Because when I think win-win, I'm constantly looking for mutual benefit. I'm constantly looking in my interactions, how can both of us win? So there is, when I look at these paradigms, if you will, the approaches to human interaction, how I view our relationships, I might have an authoritarian approach, which means I win, you lose. That's sort of the my way or the highway. I might have a I lose, you win, indulgent, right? Oh, well, that's that victim mentality. Oh, well, I just have to go along. Oh, well, I don't have any say in this. I don't have any ability. I'm just a poor victim. Lose. When two people who are both victims, 2 win-lose people get together. Somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. You both lose. So if I can't let go of that competition, if I can't let go of that insistence that I must win, if neither one of us gives, we both lose. Okay. Then there's the win where I don't necessarily want someone to lose, but I definitely prioritize what I want. I don't want it's not that I have to beat you, but I do have to win. I don't wish anything bad, but I do have to come up. I do have to be first. Still elbowing my way to the front of the line. And then, either a win-win, or frankly, it could be a no deal. When we both can't win, we agree to disagree agreeably. So when I, again, let go of my need to win, let go of my need for you to lose, let go of my perspective or my paradigm that there are winners and losers, and when I look for ways to seek mutual benefit for both of us to benefit, or when we walk away, we take a deep breath and we walk away, we disagree agreeably, and we perhaps come at it again or look at it from a different perspective. But a habit for success, 7 habits of highly effective people. Effective means we make something happen. Effective means we have impact. Effective means that we achieve, that we reach goals, that we achieve outcomes and impact. And if I want to be effective as an influencer or as a contributor, I cannot be effective and be highly competitive at the same time. I must leave room. I have to have enough confidence in myself. I have to have enough belief in my own ability to succeed, to believe that the pie is big enough for all of us to get a slice of it. Okay. Win-win. Look at this. There are 3 character traits that are essential to this mindset. First is integrity. If I am relating to you with a win-win mindset, that means when you and I come together, I don't have a hidden agenda. It means that I say what's on my mind. I'm not holding information back. I'm not using information as power. I'm not looking at you side-eyed, kind of wondering what you're going to do and testing you. I'm not playing games. You have confidence. In order for me to operate with a win-win paradigm, in order for us to operate with a win-win dynamic, we have to have integrity. There has to be some maturity. Maturity means I recognize that, you know what? It's not my way all the time. Maturity means sometimes I am wrong. Maturity means sometimes other people do have a better idea. Maturity means this might not be the path for me. This might not be the door that I'm supposed to go through. Maturity means, you know what? I'm okay. I'm okay. And if this doesn't work out here, something else is going to work out later, because maturity means I've got this. I'm okay. I'm solid. I've got this. I don't have to beat you up. I don't have to, and this goes into the abundance mentality. I don't have to take from you in order to achieve myself. There's room for all of us to be successful. There's plenty of opportunity. That is it's this habit is in the category of public victory, of interdependence, but it's also the character aspect, the mindset aspect is very much in the private victories, because for many of us, this is something we really have to wrestle with. How do I keep from being offended? How do I keep from taking everything personally? How do I see life from a perspective of this abundance mentality instead of clutching and scraping and protecting and guarding and manipulating? Think win-win if you want to be effective, okay? Kim says, know your biases, conscious and unconscious. You have to acknowledge that. And, you can get into whole stories and whole, group therapy sessions about why we have the issues that we have, right? So, somebody stole our candy from us as a baby and we've never gotten over it. I don't know. And I don't want to marginalize something of significance. But the fact is that if I have trouble with that abundance mentality, there is a problem, a personal issue that I really need to work through. I really need to exhale. I really need to believe that I'm all right. It will be all right. There's more than enough for all of us. Okay, treat others as ends unto themselves and not as a means. That's good. It's about respect, right? Let me respect you. It doesn't take anything away from me. Thank you. Okay, integrity, maturity, abundance mentality. Let's look at the next slide. Habit 5, and we have certainly heard this quoted other places, I know. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. That's part of that abundance mentality. That's part of that win-win. Seek first to understand. Let me respect others enough to hear their point of view, to understand, not just to understand it on the surface, but from an empathetic standpoint. Let me listen empathetically. Let me put myself in their shoes. Let me understand, let me understand from the heart, not just with the ears, right? See, you know, says we typically seek first to be understood. It's important to me. That's why arguments, we get louder. We get louder thinking if I say it more loudly, I'm going to make my point more clearly. It's going to press in a little bit more. No, we want to be able to listen empathetically. If I can, you know, help others. There's someone, I'm not remembering the attribute that talked about how, you know, one of the best ways to be successful is to help other people achieve success, right? Help others achieve what they want. Get what you want by helping others get what they want, right? But seeking to understand is something that is very generous, and, you know, seeking to be understood requires courage. I'm going to say seeking to understand also requires courage. Seeking to understand means I'm gonna trust. I'm gonna put my interest on hold for a minute and trust that it won't go anyplace as I work to make sure I understand you, and then to make sure that you understand. And so, in other workshops that we deliver with in EPD, when we talk about ways, mutual gains, mutual interests, ways of handling conflict that include attention to the needs of others, as well as, and we talk about advocacy versus inquiry, advocating for ourselves, inquiring to understand the needs of others, right? So inquire, let me ask questions. Before I disagree with you, let me make sure I understand. Talk to me more. And I'm going to use phrases like talk to me more. Talk to me more. Tell me more about what it is you're trying to achieve. Tell me more about why that's important to you. Tell me more about how you came to that conclusion. Because frankly, the more times I say, tell me more, the more I invite you to explain yourself, the more I am going to the more, what do I want to say? The more opportunities come to mind for win-win. When I understand that the reason you have this point of view is to meet this need, then I begin to see solutions, envision solutions that will help you meet that need without contradicting this value that I'm trying to advocate. So when I constantly tell me more, and when I say, let me explain how I came to this point of view. Let me explain why this is important to me. Let me explain. Between the let me explain and the tell me more, that's where synergy exists. You see this bottom bullet, habit 5 is right in the middle of the circle of influence. This is the part when it comes to situations of conflict, when it comes to situations where and we're going back to the term of interdependence, when it comes to situations where mutual decision-making, where both of us have to work, when it comes to places of where I have an opportunity to create a favorable, to create or to influence, positive influence for decisions on my behalf, my ability to master this habit, right? Tell me more and let me explain are two phrases that ought to really be a key part of my vocabulary so that I can first make sure I understand and then let me be understood. And that will open the door for us to create these win-win scenarios that we talked about in habit 4. Let's look at the next slide. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? I can't see everybody, so right. So habit 6 is synergize. It flows, right? I have to recognize that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Synergize means that when I think win-win, when I interact with you in a way that emphasizes understanding you and not just making myself understood, I put us in a position to achieve an impact greater than either one of us could have done by ourselves. The whole, our work together, is greater than the work of either of us alone. The concept of a catalyst. Point number 2, we must understand the relationships between the parts to catalyze and unify. The concept of a catalyst is something that accelerates in a term in chemistry, and it has to do with something that accelerates a reaction. Something that accelerates another chemical reaction. You add something and boom, that happens more quickly. It happens more effectively. It happens more profoundly. And when I understand relationships, when I have mastered this abundance mentality, when I have mastered the ability to collaborate and to connect with others in a way that maximizes our mutual understanding and mutual respect, then I have created a situation where that understanding can catalyze, it can accelerate our creativity, it can accelerate our innovation, it can accelerate the impact that we can make together. We start to get excited because we see what we have in common, where we're going, how we can get there, how we can address things that are standing in our way. It even makes us, when we synergize, we even get more creative about how we solve problems because we're looking at it from a standpoint of win-win. How can both sets of needs be met? How can we address all the needs and not just the 2 that are important to me as opposed to the 2 that are important to you? Okay, synergy requires openness. It requires communication. It can only be achieved in high trust relationships. So that means that when we get into synergistic relationships with one another, it's going to be a process. We have to have had enough interaction with one another so that we build trust. Again, with a habit, something that we do consistently. When you and I have had enough trustworthy interactions with each other, it will be easier for us to trust one another in a high stakes scenario. The more that we have built, the more time we've taken to talk, the more experiences that we've had, that we've shared successfully, the easier it's going to be, and the more highly synergistic, the better we'll work together. The more effectively and the more fruitful our interaction will be. Okay. Kim brings out the point that building the relationships that will contribute to synergy is an example of one of those Quadrant 2 activities, right? So I want to make it a point to have lunch with people that I'm going to need to work with. I want to know about them, where they come from, what's important to them, right? What skills do they bring to the table? There are other tools that we can utilize to understand one another. I need to in other workshops, we spend time talking about things like the Johari window, which sort of is a way of categorizing, making sure that I contribute information about myself that will be helpful in our relationship. So you need to know, if we're going to work together, it might be important for me to reveal to you the fact that I used to do this, or that I have this skill, I have this interest. It's useful. I have to reveal information. You have to ask me. You have to, ask me, well, where'd you go to school? What do you do? What do you like? What flavor ice cream do you like? I don't know. Whatever the factors are that will help us understand one another and help us better anticipate and leverage one another's strengths and cover for one another's weaknesses, the more opportunity we will have to create a synergistic relationship where 1 + 1 is 3 or more, right? Okay. And Kim points out that our relationship increases the more we work with people across organization. Okay, so those are the 3 habits that fall under interdependence, our work with each other, right? So beginning with the end in mind, well, let's go back to habits 4, 5, and 6 were the interdependence, the public victories, if you will. 4 was thinking win-win. That was where I started. Thinking win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, and synergize. Look for ways to increase the impact. These are the things that people will see and experience publicly. These are the things that create a winning atmosphere in the workplace. When you have a workplace that's characterized by these behaviors, it's a thrilling, energetic, and very likely highly achieving workplace, right? Public victories. And then finally, habit number 7. Okay, Graham points out about these are all ways to help with delegating, assuming that everyone has something to contribute. That's great. Yeah, and then trusting them with that in that role. And using it as opportunities for coaching. That also, which brings up, thank you, Graham, for sparking this recollection for me. When I experience someone who is genuinely interested in my success, when I experience them coaching me, when I experience them helping me through a mistake as a learning experience, when I experience, those are things that build trust, right? The more I can create the trust that they're safe, that I'm safe, the more we have something where I feel that I'm safe, the more I am likely to open up in a way that leads to that synergy, that leads to that win-win. So if we are, those of us who are in leadership positions, we want to create an environment that leads to this synergy, and an environment of high trust. It goes back to the slide that we saw about integrity, maturity, right? All of these are part of personal dynamics as leaders that contribute to an environment of trust. Okay, thank you. So habit number 7. Now that once we've mastered all these other habits and we're on a roll with our success and our productivity, how do we keep it going? And that secret is I've got to be constantly learning. I want to constantly be renewing myself, taking the opportunity to renew, taking the opportunity to continuously improve, taking the opportunity to sharpen the saw. This is what surrounds all the other habits. And this expression, you may or may not have heard, this anecdote, but the expression of sharpen the saw comes from a story that's told about a woodsman, someone who's out chopping trees, who's out sawing trees. So a lumberjack out sawing trees in a forest, and he is wrestling. This lumberjack is wrestling to cut down a particularly difficult tree, and he's pulling, and the saw just does not seem to be having the impact that he would like. And someone comes along and says, well, you could probably do a lot better. You could probably make this work a lot better if you would just sharpen your saw. And he says, no, I don't have time. I've got to get this tree sawed. I don't have time. And so often we make the same unfortunate choice, where those quadrant 2 activities, you will recall from quadrant 2, among those things was learning and development activities. And so often we will struggle with challenges in our career, with challenges in our leadership roles, and we'll be struggling, and yet we don't take the time to do just what you're doing now, to engage in continuous improvement, to engage in learning new skills, getting coaching, having someone getting feedback on what we're doing and how we could be doing things differently. So this constant coaching, this constant looking for ways to understand what's working and what's not, how we could be more effective, and how we can pick up new skills, if you will, is that habit of sharpening the saw. It's about preserving, as you see, preserving and enhancing the greatest asset which we have, which is the aspect of ourselves, right? Ourselves. And you'll note here that there are 4 dimensions. When we talk about renewal, there are 4 dimensions that we want to be paying attention to. Physical, sharpening our saw physically, maintaining our health, maintaining our wellness, maintaining our mental clarity. Spiritual, and not just from a standpoint of our religious or our faith aspects, but our spirit, the fact, that which makes us alive, that which energizes us. Mental, that would go also with intellectual. So learning our mental skills, our mental facility and ability, and our social and emotional acuity are each the dimensions of renewal, the dimensions of growth that we want to be paying attention to. So that's our 7 habits. We've covered a lot of ground there. And now we want to open for some discussion. I think we're in good time. We've got great time for a discussion about what I call the so what. Okay, now we've gone through all that. So what? How can we apply? And let's talk about these things. How can we apply this? What relevance does it have to your experiences, either in your graduate work or in your career, your current career? I understand that many, if not most of you, are actively employed even as you are full-time students. So how does this, to what extent is this relevant to you? Maybe share, if you will, what would be easy, what's going to be easy for you to implement, what's going to be more of a challenge. And are there any ideas or tips that have come to your mind that you think would be helpful for your colleagues? And so here, I really want to invite you to come off mute rather than the chat so that we can hear you live voice and actively engage in discussion around the so what of these 7 habits. What makes sense to you? Let's start at the top. How does this apply to you? How many of you are familiar, or are you familiar with the concept of fixed mindset versus growth mindset? Have you heard of that before in any of your other leadership development work or any of your other work? So the concept of fixed mindset, if we go back to that original slide with Stephen Covey's picture, looking through my notes here, that talked about the fact that habits, or our definition of habits, that talked about that these are patterns of behavior. Here we go. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. Right. And so there is one mindset that says, oh, well, this is just how I am. I'm good at, the points that were raised under habits number 1, 2, and 4. I'm terrible at the habits that were raised under, 3, 5, and 6. I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have whatever to do habit number 7. There's one mindset that just says, I am what I am, oh well. And we listen to presentations or we read books, we go over points like this and we just say, oh well, either I'm good at this or I'm not. But we don't see the possibility. We don't see ourselves as able to change. We don't see ourselves as able to take a step to master something that we're currently struggling with. And so part of what we want to apply is what would be called that growth mindset, which is to look in terms of what I've heard, what I've seen. What is it that is either contributing to the success that I've experienced so far? Or what can I honestly and transparently say has been getting in my way? That's a growth mindset. I can do something about this. I have the ability to influence my own success. So that's what I'm inviting you to share. You may have taken a personal assessment that puts you in a particular category with respect to preference. Maybe I think I understood that Kim did some training for this group on DISC sometime in the past that categorizes people according to their preferences, right? Dominant, et cetera, innovative, right? You may have done Myers-Briggs. You may have done something else. And there's some people who take those assessments from a standpoint of horoscopes. It's just, this is who I am. And there are others who take it and say, ooh, I can see that this is what's getting in my way, or I can see that this is what's helping me. And so that's what, where we can be with respect to these 7 habits as well. What's helping us? What's getting in our way? What's relevant?
So I really appreciate, I really appreciate what you're all presenting here today. And I think many of us are accustomed to becoming, and being lifelong learners. What I appreciate about this is this reinforces this idea of the more we know ourselves, the more effectively we can and constructively we can engage with others. So I think the DISCs, the Myers-Briggs, all that is just all really helpful in understanding ourselves. So I like the framing of this, and I thought this was really useful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can share some issue with me myself. As an adult grown up, I am a mother as well, but I feel shy to share my opinion in public. I don't know if I'm shy or I'm afraid, so people take a different view or change their mind about me. So I'm always feel like this is get me back. I'm so afraid in public to talk. To share opinion, to say something about like maybe even public issues. So this is my thing. And the other thing is perfection, as you mentioned earlier in this lecture. Perfection is also holding me back because I'm not an adventure guy or person. So I'm always looking for a 100% guarantee way to go that way. So this is something really, really bothering me as a person.
Right. Yeah, you raise a really interesting point in terms of being shy or being reluctant to speak up, and being reluctant to be public with your opinion and your stance, which gets into, frankly, habit number 1 about being proactive, right? So being proactive what do I have the opportunity to influence? And a good starting point, something that may be helpful in some cases there. Sometimes when we don't speak up or we don't get engaged because we're shy, we have made the situation about us and about our comfort, right? When we reframe the idea that I have something to contribute, and this situation, I have something, a way that I can be of influence, I can be a contributor. And when I don't speak up, I'm actually hampering, I'm actually holding back the success or the quality of this outcome because they don't have what I have to offer. And so I would say in most cases that the same personality that is shy is also a personality that is very generous, that is very supportive of the success of others. And sometimes it is helpful for me to reframe my thinking away from myself and to what it is that I can contribute and how this will benefit from having what I have to say. And speaking up does not mean I have to be loud. Speaking up does not mean I have to be boisterous. If I'm naturally a quiet, reserved person, I can speak up quietly, but I do want to contribute. I want to be proactive, to be engaged in places where I do have the opportunity to make an influence. So that's a great place to start. That's a great place to start, is just look for ways and look for places. You don't have to implement all 7 habits at one time. You're already engaged in habit number 7, so you got a head start on that. But look for ways to increase your voice, Maybe it's in writing, maybe you contribute something, but stand up and let people know, just the gift that you are and the insight that you have to offer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Graham made a point that beginning with the end in mind and sharpening the saw is important for his long-term goal of getting a PhD. You definitely, I have such respect for those of you who are in pursuit of your doctorate and of those advanced degrees. I have a master's degree, but a doctorate, I know you have to begin with the end in mind because it's a long, tedious journey. And there are so many places that you could easily give up if you were not always keeping that end goal in mind. So I tip my hat to you and, continue and really just applaud you for that determination. And Graham points out about having to constantly remember and reevaluate, remind yourself what the goal is personally and professionally to stay on track. And that's true whether it's getting a PhD, whether it is preparing yourself for to be qualified for your next career move, whatever it is. Sometimes it's so important to look at that long range goal so that we don't get mired down with that circle of concern, right? With the things that whether it's the politics of your office, whether it's the just the stuff that goes on around in the business situation, the budget of the company and all that sort of thing. It's so easy to let those issues of concern get in the way of the end goal that we want, career-wise, or in terms of the impact that we want to achieve for ourselves or for the people and the communities that we want to serve. So yeah, thank you, Graham. So which of these habits that we've covered, what's easy for you? Anybody? What is it that you feel really good about? Kim, could you go back to that slide? I want to say it's slide 7. It gives a summary. Yep, that one. Let's look, what's easy for you? We heard one comment about what's difficult, that being proactive. What's easy? Anybody? Who does a really great job at habit number 3, putting first things first? Who does a really great job with time management and keeping everything in order? Anybody? Graham says he does a really good job of knowing what should come first. What are some of the strategies that you use that some of you use in order to put first things first? What are some strategies that you have? What advice would you give to other participants here, people who are having trouble staying out of the weeds? What's helpful for you? I heard someone mentioned earlier making lists. They make lists to make sure that they do what someone else mentioned, scheduling time for things that are important. Any other tips that any of you use? And I understand that most of you are both full-time students and working full-time. So I know you you have some strategy, because that's no small task. So there's something that you do to keep it all together. What is it that you do that helps you keep it all together? Creating a daily to-do list, weekly and even monthly, helps a lot. I saw that, yeah. Someone raised the idea of accountability partners. Anyone else have accountability partners? I am starting once again with a personal goal of, in terms of health and wellness, and weight is part of that. And an accountability partner is an important part of my strategy for that, because I know what to do. I could teach the workshop, but staying on track is something that really challenges me. For some reason, let's see, the thought of an accountability partner. Let me read this again. For some reason, the thought of an account makes me feel really guilty. Yeah, I know that. It makes me feel really guilty because I know that an accountability partner shines light on things that are otherwise hidden, right? So an accountability partner makes it obvious, makes it apparent, says out loud that I didn't fulfill a commitment, or that I'm falling short. So it's kind of tough, but overcoming that hurdle is really a key part of moving forward. In my more conventional career life, when I was with an organization, one of the things that was a real career staller for me, I won't call it a derailer, because I was blessed to have achieved, moved along. But something that was a staller for me is I had a lot of trouble meeting deadlines, and I was constantly feeling overwhelmed. I was constantly, I was working way too late. Let's go over, Kim, turn to the slide with the 4 quadrants of activities, the 4 quadrants of time management. Let me use myself as an example, and it may or may not be relevant to you all. So I was constantly overwhelmed. My quadrant 1 activities, there was always a crisis. There was always a deadline that I was struggling to meet. There were always these pressing problems. And I, in fact, I had to admit later, when I was on the other side of recovery, that I was actually addicted to that urgency. There was a bit of an addiction there. I didn't start a project. If I had work to do, I waited till the last minute before I would start on that project. I put myself in that position where it became a crisis. So when it could have been a quadrant 2 activity, when I could have been planning or doing bits and so forth, I would always put that off until the last minute, and then I'd be up all night. And the impact of that, of having so much in my quadrant 1 and neglecting my quadrant 2, it was impacting my family because I was working inordinate hours. I was neglecting some other aspects of personal relationships that I should have. I was frequently, if I missed deadlines, I was impacting my relationship with my colleagues because it made it appear that I was not responsible. I shouldn't say it made it appear. I was not responsible. If I missed deadlines, that meant that people didn't know if they could trust me to meet a deadline. In terms of wellness and self-care, I was out of control. I was overweight. My blood pressure was high and I didn't realize it. So the fact that I had this quadrant 1 addiction was really impacting my success and impacting my effectiveness on many, many levels. I allowed myself to get overwhelmed with quadrant 2 and quadrant 3 activities and spent far too much time trying to relax or decompress, if you will, with quadrant 4 activities. And it was when I hit a wall and recognized where I was and what was getting in the way of my success, my effectiveness, my health, and every aspect of life, that I had to go back to these 7 habits, and ask myself why. What was I doing? Where was this coming from? And what did I need to do differently? And it was when I became honest with myself and recognized that I was creating many of these urgencies. Yes, the nature of my business, the nature of my professional area was such that it comes with a lot that was, could not be planned, with a lot of urgencies. But there was also so much opportunity that I was not taking, taking advantage of, to prevent those from happening. I think I saw a comment pop up that we kind of congratulate ourselves on successful all-nighters, right? We reward being heroic. We take pride in the fact that, I did all this, I'm doing all this, I'm carrying the world on my shoulders, when we should be delegating more. We should be planning better. And so, part of the invitation that I would give to each of us, as not only a part of applying these principles, but a part of continuously improving what we're doing well, is to always ask, what's really getting in the way of my success? What's really slowing me down? And what do I need to do? What's within my circle of influence, if you will, that I need to do to address this? I can't pretend everything is okay and it's somebody else's fault. It's nobody else's fault. It's my opportunity. And so the 7 habits, these are habits that I proactively have to address. It's no one's fault. It's my opportunity. What's the opportunity that I'm going to take? How am I going to plan differently? How am I going to share responsibility? How am I going to release myself from unrealistic expectations that I place on myself? Nothing is perfect. Nothing is without risk. How am I going to get okay with taking risks, okay with making mistakes? How can I allow myself to fail forward, to learn, take mistakes as learning opportunities rather than negative indications of my character? But this is where our 7 habits, building these habits, patterns of behavior, contribute to success. This is where they come in. And so I'm happy to say, it's like I always tell groups that I lead that I can use myself as a negative example in so many of these scenarios and almost all of them. But I'm happy that to report that when I took stock and when I began to systematically deconstruct what was making me successful, and I realized that my ability to build good relationships was a part of my success. My ability to learn, my ability to learn is a part of what contributes to my success. My ability to create win-win scenarios and to have my mindset of win-win, my mindset of my abundance mentality is something that contributes to my success. And so I look for ways, how can I leverage what's good and how can I develop where I need to strengthen. But this is part of building habits, if you will, building habits of success. Any other comments or questions or observations that anyone would make as we prepare to close out today? Yes, no, you don't care. Ryan is a yes. Okay, thank you. Well, listen, let's go on back to the end there, Kim. I think we want to close out similar to where we began. Slide number 24. I would remind you, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. My invitation to you is to repeatedly do the things that make sense for you, that repeatedly do the things that help you get to where you want to go. Repeatedly develop and continue to grow in the habits that will help you to achieve your version of success. Let me see, we got a question here. How can you most easily begin with having the end in mind? Let me turn that question around before I answer it. So thank you for raising that question, Ryan. What suggestions, what insight would any of you offer? How do you begin? How do you have the end? How do you put the end in mind? Anyone? Okay, my suggestion, the recommendation that I always give is I ask the question when I'm coaching leaders, what does success look like? What does success look like? Journal that, write down, think about it. Don't come up with just a quick answer, right? You might, and then ask why. In one of our other workshops, we talk about the 5 whys as a problem solving, as a way of getting to the root cause of a problem. I would say that these 5 whys can also help us get to the root of the answer to that question. What does success look like? Some people will say success is means I have an income of so many thousands of dollars, $100,000 a year. And I would say, why? And you say, because I want to, be able to have this kind of lifestyle for me and my family. Why? Because I think that's my responsibility and they deserve it. And I can ask why until I get down to the cause of what is it that I'm really trying to accomplish? And when, in this scenario, I realize that what I'm trying to accomplish is not just money in this example, but a quality of life. Then it's going to make me go back to those 4 quadrants and say, if I want quality of life, I've got to put some focus on those quadrant 2 activities that get into relationships, that get into understanding others' needs and understanding what, get into the habit of seeking to understand what is important to other people. It's going to open my eyes to other things. That's in the synergy, right? To other things that are a part of my ultimate why. But the end in mind, what is it I want? Why do I want it? And what's the ultimate why? And when I understand that, it opens my mind to a wider range of possibilities and of strategies for how to accomplish that. Ryan makes a point about people, we can be rich and still be unhappy. I tell people I pay more in taxes now than I made in my my first job, and I thought I was rich at that point, and I'm just as broke. I have more money, but I'm just as broke in many cases as I was then. So obviously, money wasn't the answer, and so I have to look a little bit harder for what is my ultimate why, and that's the end that I want to have in mind. Thanks for that question. Okay, anything else? Like this, be okay with your why, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay, financial security. Financial security is a good thing. It's okay to be financially secure. It's a wonderful thing, right? Doesn't mean you love money just for money, but you love security, emphasis on security. That's the why. And so that's going to open your mind to things other than money in terms of security. It's going to open your mind to investment. It's going to open your mind to streams of income. It's going to open your mind to other partnerships, things along that line. The more you understand, the more strategies open up to you. All right, well, listen, thank you so much for this investment of your time, your valuable time. I've got a feeling that none of you had just 2 hours on your calendar today where you had nothing else to do, so you thought you might as well come here. This was an investment. This was you sharpening your saw, and we certainly appreciate your having invested this time with us. And hopefully something has been said that's going to make a difference. It's going to provoke your thinking, challenge your thinking as you go forward, and come back to I don't want to say to haunt you, but certainly come up in your mind as you come to crossroads where the application of the opportunity to apply these principles presents itself. I want you to think about them and take some steps to really make a difference in your success. Thank you so much. Don't hesitate to contact us further if we can be of support to you individually or with your organizations. Everyone have a great day, and we'll look forward to the next time. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great meeting all of you, and Todd, I imagine you'll sign us all off, huh?
Yep, I'll take care of that.
All right.
All right, that was great.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sondra.
Yep, that
Okay,
was very
bye-bye,
interesting.
everyone.
Hey, Ruda.